All right. Good evening, everyone. How are y'all doing today? Can everybody hear us? Let us know.
Can everybody hear me?
Windows noise. Maybe I did something. Yeah, someone discorded saying I don't turn them off because I'm lazy. Yes. Hi. How's everybody doing? It has been a hot second since we have tried to do regular scheduled shows, but tonight on Wednesday nights should be me and Hetman regular every Wednesday night. It'll be fun, but
It'll
not
be
really.
us at 8 p.m. every Wednesday. Hopefully, that'll be the ideal.
Well, whatever this
Um,
time is for you now, because everyone is in different time
yeah,
zones. So, for example, it's 8 in Chicago.
it is 8:20.
It is 7. Fine, let's be really technical. 7:20, Colorado. So, it has been obviously a week. Why am I echoing in your thing? Do you have headphones?
I don't hear you echoing at all. Oh wait,
In Discord.
on.
Headphones. Hang on 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so and also on Sunday nights you'll have at least me talking about events of the week. So two guys talking history shows a week. Just one of them might just be with one guy. Anyways, tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about the Department of Government Efficiency, which makes me mad. So many different levels. And we're going to talk about Kristi Noam and her little LARPing expedition as a segue to what are your rights when ICE comes a knocking? And like you might think, well, I'm a citizen. I shouldn't have to worry about deportation. But here's the trouble. As we've talked about before, Donald Trump has decided to try to toss out the 14th Amendment illegally. So really, ask yourself, can you really prove that you're a citizen? For most of us, it's kind of trivial. You were born here, you have a birth certificate, you are functionally a citizen, but you don't really have anything that tells you that. You have a social security number, but again, a social security number doesn't prove you're a citizen. It just proves you have a social security number. You can get that when you become a naturalized citizen. All of these
I
things.
ask a valid question here.
Sure, go ahead.
So, with the new system and the revoking of the 14th Amendment, does that mean people who had birthright before and were born to two immigrant parents, do they still get to keep it? I think that's probably the case, right?
Well, the problem is no, that's the whole point is what they're trying to do. So I talked a little bit about this, but like broadly speaking, the 14th Amendment was an attempt to it was like a workaround. There's something in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and this was attempting to establish who was a citizen and how they became a citizen, and more importantly, attempting to mark out all of the people who were previously enslaved, Black Americans, as citizens, because they wouldn't have been considered citizens until then. Until someone said, "Bless you, you now become an American," and this got vetoed by Johnson, and then they tried to override the veto, and they had to do it twice. And then everyone was like, "Does Congress have the power to enact this?" And the 14th Amendment functionally gave them that power. Whether or not Donald Trump can get rid of that is up to the courts. I mean, in theory, no, but with the Supreme Court, you never know. So the thing of it is they're trying to say that these people
Just
are
give
not
me
citizens.
1 moment. I have to do something real quick with my
Or I'll
clothes.
just
Hold
answer
on.
questions. Haven't they wrongly arrested people in the past? Yes. Also, I don't want to carry a birth certificate on me at all times. Well, that's the problem. Your birth certificate doesn't explicitly establish your citizenship. Excuse me. Doesn't explicitly establish your citizenship. At least not under this particular model that Trump is trying to advocate for. And it's not obviously the only thing in question. Like, so this particular interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which is bullshit, is being challenged by a number of states' attorneys, which is good. But again, the courts are a crapshoot because a large number of the excuse me, a large number of the individuals in question.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
No problem. A large number of the individuals in question are going to be Republican judges appointed possibly under Trump. So it is an issue. Like yes, the 14th Amendment guarantees birthright citizenship, but if they choose not, like, law is law. Law is law only if we enforce them. So if people choose not to enforce the law, a lot of damage can be done before that gets rectified. And, like, speaking of that, so let's talk about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, because it's some spectacular bullshit. If you are familiar with the Constitution, you will understand that the only people who can create a government agency is Congress. And they do this through an enabling act that sets the budget for the agency, what it's there for, what its mandate is, and its duties, and its reporting, and all of that. DOGE is not a government agency. What Donald Trump decided to do, and this is, again, of questionable legality, is he took a previously existing department and then turned around and said, well, now this department does this. And it is tricky because the department he used is to set up DOGE was the United States. Let me check this to make sure I get this exactly right. United States Digital Service, which was an organization dedicated to improving government websites. I looked into it a bit, and it does have congressional approval, but it doesn't seem to have congressional approval to engage in mass oversight. So what Trump has done is said now this agency is no longer the Digital Service Agency. It is now DOGE. And what Elon Musk has done is he has deployed a number of software engineers to go and access hard drives en masse that contain information for payments for the Treasury. And this is things like Social Security numbers. Basically, if you've ever paid taxes in your life, the United States government has a not insignificant amount of personally identifiable information for you. And Elon Musk's claim is that Donald Trump that Donald Trump has given him permission to access this information in order to find fraud and waste. There are a couple problems. First of all, there is the murky authority of DOGE in the first place, which should probably sue over. And secondly, I do get the meme. It's just stupid. I choose not to acknowledge the meme. And secondly, there's this other problem. Sorry, go ahead. Hello, Hetman.
Technical.
You're cutting out. Yes,
The meme, a Shiba Inu.
Yes, it is. It is.
God damn it.
It's not
That's like the last thing we need is like a another NAFO style meme.
It's not, to the best of my knowledge, associated with NAFO. It is a entirely separate use of that stupid ass dog. But like, there's another problem here. Is like, you can't, like, if suppose I want to look for a crime, investigate a crime, I can't just dive into information willy nilly. I have to secure. I have to secure a warrant for this specific information. I can't just access everybody's shit and go, well, I found it.
I
So
mean,
like
that's the whole part of due process, right?
that's the whole part of due process in the
In
Fourth
general.
Amendment against unreasonable search and seizure. So like inarguably this should be a non-starter. And it obviously is a factor of Donald Trump's unwillingness to obey the law and Elon Musk's total ignorance of anything in life that isn't, two legs and a pair of boobs, but that he can harass. But the significant problem is that this is bad on a number of levels. The treasury system, these payment systems are probably old and decrepit and need to be upgraded anyway. But like you have a number of unvetted individuals plugging in random ass external hard drives, which is the most obvious point of security failure you can possibly have in a workplace as far as IT security is concerned. And they have access to all this information in this code, and they can change it however they want. Billions of dollars could be stolen. What you're talking about here is functionally the largest security breach in American history, possibly in world economic history, of unauthorized people gaining access to information they should not have. This is
Can I pose a question? Because honestly, I haven't been
paying attention.
paying attention to Dodge or anything, related to it, but has it been like I've heard that it's unofficially established, right?
It is established via executive order as a temporary agency, which or bullshit.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, how is that, you know, I didn't know that through executive orders that you could establish a temporary agency.
Well, the argument that
Like
MAGA is making is that they haven't established an agency; they have taken an existing agency and redirected its purpose, which
so
is
what's that existing agency?
it was it was an agency that was dedicated to the improvement of government websites. Barack Obama formed it via congressional well, it was authorized by Congress to be formed in order to improve the ACA website principally. A couple other websites were in it, and it was kind of this unofficial officially making a number of unofficial efforts to make government websites more accessible, uh, to come under the umbrella of a department that has to be accountable to Congress. It's arguably not possible to like it's arguably illegal, I should say, to form a agency in such a way. Like if I want to issue an executive order directing the FBI to crack down on certain aspects of interstate smuggling, I can do that. I cannot turn around and suddenly direct the FBI to do something outside of its mandate, for example. That the purpose of executive orders has to be not necessarily creating new law, but to ensure that laws can already constituted can be judiciously carried out.
So you can't, per se do an exact like make an executive order bless me. All right. That like forms a temporary secret police organization.
You shouldn't be able to, no. Congress has to create any new organization to which the federal government uses to execute the law, because the purpose of Congress's power of the purse is that Congress authorizes the expenditures of the executive branch. So the executive branch can't basically reappropriate funds like that. There's a whole bunch of constitutional issues that Dodge raises. Like the idea is that there is a check on the powers of the president, but the president doesn't have unlimited power. There are organizations that are dedicated to eliminating waste and mismanagement. And to be frank, what everything Dodge is talking about so far is pretty standard stuff. Like they've targeted U.S. aid USAID as a principal thing is a quote unquote waste of money, but most of that's soft power shit. They pay to make sure that favorable information about the United States is distributed. Avery's about to go nuts. My roommate is home. Give me one.
You have to take him out.
I haven't let him out of the room. I had to close the door because I fix it up.
All right, we're back, right? Hello.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm back. Yeah. So you end up with this particular quagmire. I am coming through your thing again.
Sorry about that. I don't have headphones, by the way, at the moment.
I'll send you a link on Amazon. It's like 5 pairs of cheap headphones for like $10. They actually are really good for cheap headphones.
It's not that I don't have them. I just don't have them in my new apartment.
Exactly. So you can get them sent to your new apartment. Little package. Boop. Do they have clearances at all? I don't think so. The best I can tell, these are all software engineers. Have you heard that this White House released the names of every CIA agent hired in the last 2 years? I haven't heard that they released the names of CIA. I saw In Time, the news show, was doing something about CIA listings. I have to look at that more closely to know what the hell's going on because things are happening quick, and I prepared this show and not the next show. Like there are like. Do you know if they've listed clandestine appointments in the last 2 years or just overt employees?
This is actually something I was not aware of as well.
Avery, go downstairs. Go get food. Go get food. Yes, you can go. Good boy. I have to give the dog permission to go eat.
That is one very smart dog.
Well, well, if he goes, he's very smart. He's mostly just attached. Really, really attached. You're okay. Go ahead. But yeah, have we heard this White House? Let's just look at that.
What are we doing?
I am checking AP. CIA offers to buy out staffers as director. Samp. I don't know why we're still calling this a push to transform the federal government. It's rank corruption. Let's just call it what it is. If someone could send me where they're leaking agents' names. If it wasn't in America and American problems didn't spill it everywhere, this thing would be hilarious. Well, not to those of us living here. So yeah, Dodge is like incredibly problematic as a agency. Kind of like constitutional crisis levels of problematic. And like there is the capstone to this story, at least for the last couple hours, has been that 3 federal unions and federal employee unions have sued to block Dodge's access to Treasury information. And they should be receiving a temporary injunction probably tomorrow. So hopefully this gets at least stopped for a while. Like basically the only thing you can really do at this point with Trump is gum up the works as best as you're able. and throw up roadblocks and force him into positions where he has to violate the law, and then point out the hypocrisy between swearing to uphold the law and failing to follow the dictates of it. That's kind of where we're at, and that's an incredibly dangerous place for a country to be, because obviously, like I said before, the law is only worth it if people are upholding it. And if Trump chooses not to uphold it, then
There's checks and balances in place,
but those are dependent upon the organization like Congress not being ideologically captured by Trump.
Of course, yeah.
And the
That is
fact
how you
is,
override it. That's how you destroy these structures.
yes,
And it can happen remarkably fast, as we know, like, in terms of history. It happened after Hitler took power. I think it was something like, I don't know if it was 100 days or 50 days he was able to do that. We've seen it done in El Salvador just recently with Bukele.
yeah.
Whether or not like he's done some beneficial things to the country. I mean, the mass incarceration has helped with crime, and it was beset by crime to the point where things were not functioning normally. But in the process, he's eroded democratic institutions. I'm not sure how long it took Mussolini to do the same. But yeah, those structures that we take for granted, they can be overridden, they can be destroyed.
Well, there's two
And in an
things.
event of a crisis, it's even more likely that they'll be
Destroyed.
Yeah, destroyed.
The second problem is that, like, you were naming countries that were in crisis. Weimar Germany was experiencing a massive economic crisis. El Salvador is experiencing a crisis. Let's take another example. For example, Rwanda. Rwanda's dictator has been Rwanda's dictatorship comes in at that exact moment that the genocide is happening and helps end it. It still has deleterious effects after
Yeah,
the
Paul
fact.
Kagame. He's been in power since then.
Yes, he's been in
And
power ever since the genocide. Rwanda.
honestly, I will be flat honest. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about Rwanda post genocide to know whether or not him staying there or him, like, if him leaving would be worse for
Well,
the country.
to be perfectly frank, I don't know if that's really the item on discussion. You obviously have the case of Rwanda's recent escalation in the Congo to talk about in regards to that. But the point is, more broadly, is that these countries were experiencing substantive crises at the time that simply were not in existence here. So,
Yeah.
like, Trump has co-opted this particular language of crisis dictatorship in order to justify that.
And you can easily create a crisis, which essentially he's been doing with the whole
Well, it's an extension of a very old
invasion
Republican trick.
across our border and our unsecured border.
The idea has long been for Republicans since at least Reagan and a little bit beyond to present the government as dysfunctional and present themselves as a cure. The problem is that they typically are the ones who create the dysfunction. So a really good example of this is the post office. The United States Postal Service is actually pretty good, all things considered. It is not economically viable, but the principal reason is it's not economically viable is that they are required to fully fund their pensions, which other people are not. So a not insignificant portion of postal service operating expenses is a like, it hampers their ability to compete with private services like FedEx and UHL and what. This is something that they're required to do by Congress. It wasn't a decision that the Postal Service was able to take on themselves. It's also a decision which, when proven to be unviable, they cannot discharge themselves. And so you see this push to say, well, the postal service is not economically viable, so we should replace it. But the economic inviability was created by Congress in the first place. Same thing for the IRS. You have people saying, well, the IRS is convoluted and impossible to follow. Congress sets the tax code, not the IRS. The IRS can only enforce the tax code.
That's what I was just going to say. They're just a tool of enforcement. They're not,
So it's this
a
incredibly
lawmaker.
it's this incredibly dishonest uh framing of how these things come about and happen. If Congress wants a simpler tax code, they make a simpler tax code. They don't want a simpler tax code.
It's also, look, I mean, it's also like a means of, appealing to their voter base. Their voter base is essentially, okay, what organization do people hate? The IRS, the post office. You basically utilize that as a means to, one, garner support among your constituents, and two, you use that as a means to get rid of those organizations, and then you fund private ones that exist like FedEx and all of that. If there was no post office, by the way, the prices of the other organizations would go through the roof.
Skyrocket. Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
that's the thing is like you get backwards lobbying. The post office actually used to provide a lot of services. They used to provide low cost banking in the past.
Low cost what?
Banking, things like that. Like it was a genuine community center service where you could get a lot of crap done. That was a little bit more complicated, but part of the problem there is that like people don't want access to low cost banking. An unbanked population is a population that you can more easily fleece with payday loans. So like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that particular point. But the broader point is that when you're told that something isn't working in government, you need to analyze why. I had this conversation with someone the other day. We were talking about this kind of idea of populism and how often populism encourages you not to use critical thinking skills. It says thing X is bad, and
The whole purpose of it is to appeal to the emotions of the masses.
yes,
That is populism.
and there's this whole industry built around selling you products that are populist in nature. For example, last Sunday we talked about that Adam Conover video and did a sponsored segment for Ground News that I skipped through. And if you haven't seen the ads, Ground News is this news aggregate that puts all these stories together and lists the biases that they have. And it's a membership. You pay, join it. This is like the thing people don't seem to get is that making a list of biased organizations requires you to analyze the bias of the person making the list. You cannot buy your way out of critical thinking. There's no product that puts it up there for you.
No, you can. It requires you to explore both sides. That's the whole point of it.
Or
Right.
probably more accurately, all sides, because there are more than two sides. That's
100%.
like we tend to think that way here in the United States because it's Republican and Democrats have such wide-ranging policy initiatives and big tent nonsense going on. But ultimately, the problem that you find with this framing is that it obscures our ability to have effective and honest discussions about our society's engines and how they work. The long and the short of it is like in this case of Dodge, is we're probably going to have to redo the entire system because we cannot account for whatever what if one of these unvetted software engineers puts codes that routes 1 cent out of every payment into their own personal account. They could steal billions of dollars and we'd never know it because we have no ability or oversight over this organization. The entire thing has to be thrown out and redone.
I feel like we should segue into ICE. But actually go over, we go over the packets of, knowing your rights if you're
Yeah.
stopped by them. I think we should talk maybe a little bit about the organization, about what's been going on, and I'm at sort of I have the unique opportunity to really see it first, not like, what they're doing, their raids or anything, but I see
The effect.
the fear that it is causing firsthand. So I work in a high school district that is predominantly Latino, and those who are not Latino are Ukrainian parolees and Russian asylees or Central Asian asylees. So essentially, people who have fled the war in Ukraine in various capacities. So these are also people in legal limbo now. A lot of them have switched from the U4U program to TPS, so temporary protected status. So literally every one of my coworkers has someone that they know, or even a family member whose papers are either in flux or they're undocumented.
Look, if you live in a major
they are
metropolitan area,
terrified. They are in such a horrible position. A lot of the students that I'm working with, the first few weeks that this started, they weren't showing up to classes. We're being briefed on what to do. So essentially, there's a few public parts of the school that they can go into without any warrant, but there are most of the school, like classrooms, things like that, they cannot enter without a warrant. There has been, I just heard from someone today who she said she was going to watch this, and this will be probably the most interesting part because, it was really. What?
Just keep going. You heard from someone
So,
today.
What'd you say?
Said you heard from someone today.
Yeah. So, someone told me about how they've actually pulled people over in their cars. Which is really astounding, to me. I didn't know that they had that kind of power.
There is, so if immigration enforcement has always happened on the and obviously a very wide range interpretation of what constitutes order in the United States. Excuse me. A dust today. Anyway, you have Border Patrol, and the Border Patrol has a range of responsibility that extends 100 miles from the borders of Mexico and Canada. And those are areas they can operate and search in. However, for the rest of it, you have ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They are a fairly new federal agency formed in the wake of 2001, under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security. And you'll recognize Kristi Noam, our new director of Homeland Security and puppy murder, LARPing in New York City the other day in an plate carrier head of the Department of Homeland, and not a qualified agent. So the purpose of ICE is immigration enforcement outside of that 100 miles that the Department of Border Patrol is capable of operating. And they are unpopular in some circles, to put it mildly. They're a federal agency. They're a federal law enforcement agency. They have some weird jurisdictional things with the FBI about the scope of the discussion. But
I don't know which organization's more infamous, them or the ATF.
The ATF is mostly unpopular with right-wing gun nuts. Like the ATF is
They
on all
are, but they've royally fucked up almost everything that they've tried to do.
uh
And honestly, I don't understand why we need a separate agency for what they do when honestly you could probably bunch that like make it a sub department of the FBI, quite honestly.
well,
Like
the
I
reason
don't
they're
know
a
they
separate
they
department in
exist
particular.
for what they do. They don't do a whole lot of good. And yeah.
Well,
Um
the idea is that they are designed around the concept what would alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Alcohol and firearms in particular are big ticket items for organized crime to work with and smuggle. Tobacco is also a
I
10
mean
billion.
alcohol was, right?
It was, yes, but tobacco is a $10 billion black market. Uh, especially in cities. So there are a lot of somewhat disreputable places you can go and buy cigarettes. And they are definitely like they'll have the tax stamp on the cigarette, show it's been paid, but it's forged. You're still paying 12, $15 a pack. These places are making fucking killings because they're not paying the tax. Uh, the reason that
So
the
we need
ATF exists,
a whole nother agency to deal with it.
yeah, is it not strictly speaking necessary? Maybe like that would be something to talk to uh someone about, like FBI
I
ish.
don't think it's necessary at all. And in fact, I'm not alone in thinking that. I'm not even like a right winger thinking that. It was going to be. There were talks about us dissolving it in the 90s. That was something that Al Gore was
Well, that would be
actually a
much
big
closer to
proponent of.
the Waco incident.
That was close to the Waco incident, and part of the reason why that happened. I'm sorry. You can think whatever you want of the cult of um
Fresh.
David Koresh. I mean, we're not talking about that as a specific episode today, but they could have easily, if it were about arresting him, just arresting him, they could have nabbed him on the many jogs he took into town. That is what they could have done, but they wanted to look useful. And they
Well,
failed miserably at it, and it became a big problem.
we're still well
So yeah,
beyond the
I'm
scope
not,
today.
I don't believe the whole narrative pushed by the government in regard to Waco.
We're,
I
we're,
just
we're,
it's BS, and a lot of the survivors there will tell you it's BS.
we're still beyond the scope today. Talking about ice.
Yeah, it's beyond the scope of what we're talking about. Anyway, I just want to lay that out there.
And I'm really not prepared to go into a thing we haven't. At any rate,
Maybe we'll do an episode. Vote in the comment section if you want to see an episode based on Waco where I debate Daedalus about it. I don't know if it's going to be a debate, but I will totally do that.
after the gun one, you want to do that again?
This is once we get 700 subscribers.
Oh, okay. So that'll take a month. The right things have slowed. A bad. Will there be mud? I will throw mud. Yes.
Will there be mud? Oh my god, it's Maya. Hello, Maya.
At any rate, ICE is immigration enforcement. Like, I don't want to compare them to a secret police because they're not secret. They're just sort of blundery.
No, that's too extreme, but
But they
to
have
be
this
honest,
reputation around it. Problematic. They are immigration enforcement. They do raids. They have it's a weird double effort because we talked about the problem of making immigration hard is bad for your economy, but it's also really good for certain businesses. So what ends up happening is you have ICE doing raids on workplaces a lot, where there are people who are undocumented.
you have people, any organization. Here's one thing to keep in mind, though. Any organization that has people working for it usually has people aligned with the mission and ideology of that organization. So, in ICE, you can bet that there is definitely a very strong people who have a strong biases and ideological bents to be predisposed against certain groups of people.
Well,
I
I
don't think
don't
you can debate that. I
I
don't
don't think
think
I
that
would
there's much
deny
of a
that,
debate there.
but I
Yeah.
don't know how, like, I've seen more evidence of the border patrol to a certain extent.
Border Patrol is interesting. It's kind of like the vast majority of the staff, like of the on the border patrol, are actually Hispanic people, and a lot of them are those groups of people in like Texas or New Mexico who have lived there for a very long time.
That's not
Some aren't though, and
that's
that's
not as
actually a very
surprising
interesting
as
thing.
I think as
What?
I don't think that's as surprising as people think. Um, like one of the topics we've had it, like we've heard it both times in Trump's election, 16 and more. People were shocked by how strong the strain of conservatism amongst the. That's not surprising to me at all,
No, it's
really.
not surprising. It's traditional,
Yeah,
very patriarchal and traditional families.
and like a lot of them are
Um
like very strongly and they identify with that particular politics.
of
The
course.
idea, and this is also true for African Americans, very Christian. They have the idea that there's this mortal lock that the Democrats have on minority votes is
No, it's
malicious.
BS, and honestly the fact that they think that is
When you say they, you
it's
mean the
problematic in
Democrats or
itself,
Republicans?
quite
Both
honestly.
sides think that, and
I'm
both
not going
sides
to
are
tell
incorrect.
I'm not going to tell anyone how to vote.
Well, no, I
And
think
if I
it's
meet a like if I meet like, a person who is, minority and they're, voting right, they're voting Republican, that's their choice.
well, oh yeah. I'm not saying it's not to vote that way, but what I am saying is that there is this underlying assumption, and it's built into the Republicans' effort to deny people voting rights too, that they will never be able to win these votes. But that's just not true. Uh, that's just not true. Like the line, like it's if you offer groups of people what they want and stop hitting them, they're probably going to support you. So it's a dual nature thing. A lot of there's deep dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party and a lot of these circles, what they regard the Republicans as worse. So that yeah, the entire idea, like I'm not surprised by how many people of Hispanic descent work for the Border Patrol because they have to know
There's
Spanish
also
in the
an
first place.
advantage to having them, right? Because you know, they're bilingual usually. Um, One thing too that I want to stress, we were talking about how ICE is not a secret police organization and the Border Patrol, I mean, there are laws that I do think need to be followed. I'm not a proponent necessarily of open borders, but the way in which ICE conducts itself, the way in which the Border Patrol conducts itself, some of the things that they have done in the past is, like the ATF,
I think the
to me,
Border Patrol is
very, very heavy
significantly more
handed.
than the ATF for ICE. The Border Patrol, for example, destroy life supplies to deny them migrants. I
Yeah, I've
think
heard of that too, where
that's
they
I
where they
think
like
that's
actually destroy their water, food.
yes, I think that's significantly more egregious ultimately in the basis. Look, I'm not gonna say I like first of all, I think when we talk about open borders, we have to be specific what we mean. I don't open borders is not unregulated or unpatrolled borders, but by the same token, um, I don't like. There's a way to do things. There's a way to be, right? And the idea of these organizations, police too broadly, don't follow these way to be. They're much more aggressive. They're much more extremist than like discipline isn't about appearances. It's also about ideas and whether or not you're capable of holding on to your humanity. And
Yeah, it's about treating everyone as a human being,
yeah,
essentially.
there's a way to do
And
your
that's
job. Like
what that's, in military parlance, that's what separates a professional army from.
thugs. And my feeling about
Yeah.
most law enforcement agencies is ultimately they have devolved into thuggery because they don't follow this way to be. Like there's a way to do your job. A certain amount of like you're doing a job once it starts to consume you ideologically in that way, where you see everyone as a threat, you've gone far. You are over the edge. Carpet gone. And the fact that law enforcement agencies tend to encourage this kind of thinking, incredibly dangerous.
Of course, and there's kind of this, martial warrior culture in law enforcement that has emerged that honestly, even in an odd way, it didn't really exist in like the mid 20th century, even though law enforcement was,
Well, I think a good way of looking at
definitely more racist, definitely like, got away with more egregious crimes, but you did not have that culture, that military style culture with it.
there's
Um,
I want to do two things here. I want to talk about Batman, why Batman became popular. Because I think this is like kind of interesting to see. Batman as a superhero is like obviously Bruce Wayne is just a fucking person, right? And Batman's principal thing is I've got my utility belt with all my bullshit on it. Oh, when Batman came out as a comic and when Batman was popular as the campy ass, what was his name? Animated Batman voice in the 60s, 70s.
oh,
Anyway,
Adam West.
Adam West. Yeah, like when that was popular, like police officers were carrying 38 special revolvers and nightsticks.
Yeah.
Driving these heavy ass cars. Today they have highly advanced surveillance systems. The police have got a belt that would make Batman blush, like pepper spray, tasers, handguns, radios, uh, all this crap that they have. Batman as a hero has escalated too. Like, so look at Batman in the Christopher Nolan movies, The Dark Knight. Batman's whole thing is he builds an echolocation system out of telephones, uh, kind of mirroring what the NSA would be capable of in very short order. The concept of law enforcement, this idea of like retribution and vigilantism out of that particular thing comes from a period when the police were much less better equipped um than they are now.
Yeah.
And there's a certain
And they
thing.
did their job just as effectively, I would say.
Well, that's for a certain value of effectively. The other thing that's weird
Yeah,
about
I
the
know, I
police
know.
is that we don't really like we have things like crime stats and whatnot, and some places report these, some don't.
I think I want to raise a point though. I think that accountability there's more accountability now than there ever was.
Sure,
I,
absolutely,
I
but
I
that's
have to
still
let that.
not
Yeah,
saying much. And like we have to make a lot of projections at how effective police are at their job. 'Cause we out collect the data the way and by and large it appears that whether or not you're going to get away with a crime in this country is a coin flip. Um it doesn't seem that way, particularly with the rise of propaganda shows where you always get your man. But statistically, it seems that like 50% of crimes go unsolved overall, and that's across everywhere.
that's because most cops do 50% of their job.
Uh, fair. But the other point I want to make is the militancy of police is silly. So, and this comes up all the time, but I want to tell a particularly set of illustrating stories. For a good while, I was participating in an Arma 3 unit. Arma 3 is a milsim sandbox computer program. Basically, you can, it's like Dungeons and Dragons for people with gun fetishes. And this unit was organized by a cop. And good lord, was he a tactical idiot. So, for
Like a
example,
cop playing Arma.
yes, for example, he was leading part of the unit, and he comes up on a building where he's getting fired on from the building, and he stops the Humvee, and he has everybody get out of the Humvee and open the doors. Then he starts driving the Humvee slow while people walk behind the Humvee for 100 meters, all under fire from assault rifles. And if you're not like familiar with the particular problem here, the particular problem, Jesus, he just started playing Arma 3 down. How funny. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the particular problem here, first of all, assault rifle bullets will go through doors. Second of all, if you're being fired at, you don't want to walk in front of the person who's firing at you slowly. It's like, oh yeah, that's how the cops do it. Police have to do a very specific job, and they have some significant advantages. So suppose you've committed a crime and you're running from a police officer. That police officer has access to a radio with which they can call in your location, and other police officers can respond and box you in. It's a very different system than what you might find in a military environment.
They also, one thing that has to be stressed too, and it's something that I feel like they don't do enough. Um, they do it in the wrong time, actually. When they need to run towards a threat, they often don't do it. When they don't, they do.
Well,
They have the option of actually say you know, and I'm not talking about like an active shooter event, but like say, there's a criminal running away, or a group of them who might be very well armed. They have the option to disengage and wait. They don't
Yes.
always do that.
Well,
One thing that also has to be said too is that their training on firearms, they qualify about, I know it's more than twice a year, but it's not a lot. To meet the qualifications is not that hard. They're not that well trained or equipped to be in a firefight. You do have among agents, like that's why a lot of agencies now they're really looking to hire military veterans, which is problematic to me in some ways, but because they want people who have had experience under fire. But the vast majority of cops have never been shot at, they never will be shot at, and they won't use their gun in the course of their entire career. And that's kind of the ideal, right? You don't want to have to shoot someone. That said, they should cut the martial culture BS and actually stick with what the job actually entails. Of course it entails having to take the life of a person, if need be. It entails arresting people who might resist you fiercely. And it entails in the very real, in the very rare scenario that you might get shot at. They're not really taught how to, deal with that in the right way.
Well,
not in the same way that a military person would. And, actually a lot of cops, so there's like, like books and manuals you can get. They're not assigned reading for them, but they're like basically made so it basically teaches you basic tactics or firearms tactics in the context of police work. A lot of that's extracurricular for them, by the way. It's not just standard training.
Well, there's two problems I see with a. The first is that, like you said, most of them aren't good. Begs the question of why. The second is when you get involved in the firefight. Police, I've looked at some of the police training materials. They tend to emphasize like you're basically standing in front of the guy, drawing weapons and shooting, and see who shoots first. It's very close range, very deadly. However, when that does not happen, what ends up happening is a firefight. Uh, and the problem with this is that firefights are not decided by who is the most accurate, but who puts out the most lead. And this
Yeah.
is obviously
And
deleterious.
who finds cover quicker?
Yes, this is deleterious to the survival of people around you. So, like the military, the first thing you're going to do in the military, what they're going to teach you is throwing yourself into cover. And if you don't have cover, you hit the fucking dirt. And it's taught basically one of the first things is called individual movement. And you take your rifle and you fall down to the ground. Basically, you hit the ground with the rifle butt and push yourself forward. Then you use this to break your fall. This is the first thing you do. Then you worry about figuring out shooting, because you will not survive long if you are standing in the open.
If you're standing up. Yeah.
The second, so like the second half of this particular iteration, is that for all the training in the world, you don't know what's going to happen when you. And I had an instructor in college in ROTC who said there's two types of people: people who freeze and people who get pissed. And both of these reactions are things you have to train out of. And if you don't do that training, they're never going to be ready.
That's live, live ammo training. That's fire training, right?
Yes.
That's
so like
yeah,
very
live
early
fire
on,
training.
very early on in basic training and in our officer training, they try to acclimate you. They operate with blanks and blank adapters so that you know what being shot at is sound like on the other end. Not necessarily the bullet flying at you, but like you can hear someone at the other end. And then they train with Miles gear, which is laser assisted training with blank rounds. So like these are like the acclimation is incredibly important to making that relative amount of safety. But I would point out that throughout much of the civilized world, police are unarmed except for special exceptions and high response groups. It's not that it's a necessary requirement. Our American police shoot an ungodly number of people, and that's not just because there's a large amount of guns in the United States. It's just it's a dangerous situation. Once again, we are off topic. I'm going to throw this up in front of this, and I'm going to stream it for you. This is from the National Immigrant Justice Center. I pulled it up the other day looking for information that was useful in this regard, because we wanted to talk about how you and I and anyone else you might know handle ICE.
Are you there?
Yep. All right. So this is especially important at the top. All individuals in the United States have rights regardless of immigration status. And this is important because you see a lot of people trying to argue that immigrants don't have rights. The Constitution does not discriminate in such a way. It assigns a certain set of rights to people as human rights, not specifically rights for Americans. We'll try to argue otherwise. They're wrong. President-elect Donald Trump has threatened our communities by promising mass deportations of immigrants. Oh, yeah, hang on. Boop. Thank you, Palm Dad. One of the tools the Trump administration may use is the expansion of the expedited removal program, combined with raids in neighborhoods and workplaces. Using expedited removal, an immigration officer may quickly deport individuals without due process if the government establishes they have entered the United States without immigration documents and have been in the country for less than 2 years. People deported under the expedited removal may be detained and deported without appearing before an immigration judge. Other immigrants, regardless of how long they have been in the United States, may experience immigration enforcement and removal. Anyone without secure immigration status may be subject to enforcement efforts. And we would note that people who are, in fact, citizens may be, well, as that has happened several times in the last several weeks. People who were ordered to deported in the past and people who have had contact with the criminal legal system are at particular risk. 5 things you can do now to protect yourself and loved ones. Seek a legal consultation. With private attorneys, call the American Immigration Lawyers Association at 1-800-954-0254 for a referral. With nonprofit organizations that employ U.S. licensed attorneys or Department of Justice accredited representatives, a list of these organizations may be found at the Immigration Advocates Network or the Illinois Access to Justice. So I want to make a special note here. In particular, if you are aware of someone who is seeking legal counsel at this, double check to make sure that the lawyer they have engaged is an actual immigration lawyer and not a mill. Obviously, if you've been watching President Sunday lately, you saw that particular incident with Not So Erudite, where it appears that she was engaged with a immigration mill as opposed to a genuine attorney. This is something to be check very carefully, because these kinds of people will fleece people out of money. Create a safety plan. Identify your emergency contacts and memorize their phone numbers. Provide your child's school or daycare with an emergency contact to pick up your child. Provide authorization in writing for your emergency contact to make medical and legal decisions. That would also be something to make sure you engage a lawyer with if you have. Tell your loved ones that if you're detained by ICE, they can try to use ICE's online detainee locator to find you, and there's a link to that here. Read more about guardianship and power of attorney considerations for immigrants in Illinois and Indiana. Step 3, collect your documents in a safe place, which is something that everyone should do anyway, so that if you ever have to evacuate your home, all your documents are there. Keep your identity information and financial information in a safe location. Gather documents showing the length of time you have been in the United States. The most recent 2 years are the most important. This can include income tax returns, utility bills, leases, school records, medical records, bank records, or other documents. Make sure your emergency contact may access all these documents. Read and practice the NIJC's guidelines on what to do if you encounter ICE in your community. Avoid immigration fraud. Only seek legal advice from an attorney or accredited representative of at a Department of Justice recognized nonprofit organization. Lawyers must have a license from a U.S. state to practice law. Ask to see the law license. Law licenses from other countries are not authorized for the practice of law in the United States. Accredited representatives must be accredited and work for a nonprofit agency recognized by the DOJ. Ask to see their accreditation documents. Never sign an application with false information. Big one. I'll figure it out real quick. Never sign a blank form. Ask for copies of everything you sign. If advice sounds too good to be true, get a second opinion before filing an application. And they have a link to how to avoid immigration fraud. Be alert for digital scams. Be skeptical of social media posts promising new or quick immigration relief. To be frank, the United States government hasn't had an effective immigration relief process in decades. It's not coming anytime soon. The U.S. government, including the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Immigration and Custom Enforcement, and the State Department, will never contact you via WhatsApp or social media. They don't know how to use WhatsApp. With limited exceptions, such as people who are released from detention and told they must check in with ICE via telephone, the government does generally not contact individuals by phone. If you receive an unexpected message or phone call from someone who claims they are an immigration officer or other government official, do not respond or share personal information. Do not wire transfer money for a processing fee or any other reason. If in doubt, consult an attorney or credit representative before taking any action. Avoid sharing unverified information on social media. And I picked this in particular because we're talking about Illinois in the context of Hetman's thing. If you need support, call the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, ICIRR, Family Support Hotline at 1-855-HELP-MY-FAMILY, 855-435-7693, or visit the ICICRR section for more community resources. Chicago residents are eligible for free legal services through the National Immigrant Justice Center through the City of Chicago Legal Protection Fund. Immigrants in Illinois can obtain free or low-cost consultations and representation from the NIJC. Sure, this has nothing on it. And then they have an additional... Oh, this is much of the same. But they do have what I want here. This is a example of a warrant. And they made sure to mark it out. They have a couple other ones. This is a detainer for immigration and a notice of action. And finally, this is, I believe, a judicial bench warrant. Yeah. So I know this is not particularly satisfying information, ultimately. It doesn't necessarily address the problem or make you feel safer. It is, however, the scope of the best advice I can find that's not going to get you in more trouble. Been awfully quiet, Hetman.
No, I've just been looking at all the forms. I can also provide a list of non-for-profit organizations that help and that are able to actually, give low-cost legal services to people.
Yeah, so we're not going to necessarily be able.
For those who don't know, I worked in refugee resettlement for about a year.
So yeah, it's the thing. I don't know if there's a good answer to like make people feel better. Obviously, this is scary. All you can do is do the best prep work you can. Hide your dog if the feds come knocking. Yeah, that too. Police shoot dogs way too often.
Yeah, that's one thing I really don't like about them. They have pepper spray. What could be more effective against a dog than fucking pepper spray?
Well, you don't even have to hit the dog with the pepper
It's
spray.
got a
in most
giant
cases.
olfactory organ.
Yes.
You can spray the air and they'll run away. I've done it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, you don't
yes.
even have to hit the dog to get them to back off in that case.
Yeah.
But with that, I think that, unless you've got anything else, would be it for this evening.
Yeah, I think we covered everything. We got off to a slow start, but things got very exciting pretty quick, and yeah, we'll decide what to do next week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Well,
I'll
I will
see
be
you
here
next
Sunday.
Wednesday.
Anyway, have a good
Yeah.
night, everybody.